Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to class 2 of the Sexuality in the Bible, as imagined by me. Anyway, I'm going to invite you to ponder this question, and then we'll go around the room. You'll say your name and pronouns and answer this question. What is the least important question about the Bible? And some of you might be able to cheat because you know my response. I'm not asking for my response. I'm asking for your response. All right, Alex. You can either say yes. What do you believe to be the least important question about the Bible? I'll sit up. That way I can keep an eye on it. What's my bad eye? So you probably get away with me. Yeah. All right. Ponder for a moment as you're getting settled. What do you think is the least important question about the Bible? The least. I love this question. Sorry for my diabolical laughter.
Whether it's accurate.
Oh, think about it. We'll share. Yep.
I just came to a really good lecture.
Oh, cool. You got another 30 seconds to ponder this life-changing question. I don't want to get it so I don't also get the other screen. Yeah. What's that? Yeah, she may have had a bad connection. Let me see. Oh, she just turned off her camera. But she's still there. All right, so I'm going to start. I'm going to ask for a volunteer to begin this question. Just say your name and pronouns and what you think is the least important question about the Bible. David.
My name is David. And it is the least important question about the Bible is how many pages long is it?
All right, that's a good one. We'll just go to your left. Mary.
Mary, she heard. To me, it'd be trying to prove it's veracity because I don't believe any of it.
Sue Rocker, she, her. I was thinking that maybe consistency from one part to the other because we know it's more.
Why isn't it consistent? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Lauren Carlton, she, her, and I have to pass.
Okay, Lauren has to pass. That's okay. Sarah.
I'm Sarah. I use she, her pronouns. I don't think it super matters who wrote it.
It doesn't matter who wrote it. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Jeff Grable, he, him. All my life I contemplated the most important thing, and I cannot answer this question.
There you go. Cool. Deborah Ann.
I would say Deborah, she, her. We say the least important question in the Bible is why.
There you go. Jane.
Jane, she, her, whether it's true or not.
Whether it's true or not. Alex.
Alex Thompson, they, them,
There you go.
I'm not sure.
You're not sure. That's okay. Chantel, the least.
Literally on the hot seat.
Oh, that's okay.
What's
Think
the
about
question?
it. I'll ask Sue while you think about the question.
What's the question?
The question is, what do you think is the least important question about the Bible? All right.
So
Yes.
she, her, hers, and I think an irrelevant question is the debate over, is it the word of God?
Yes. Reverend Scott, he, him, I think the least important question, it's very similar to some of yours, is did Jesus actually exist? And I'll explain that when we're done. Yes.
Maria, she, her. Really have no idea, but maybe you have to believe it.
You have to believe it. There you go. Ooh, I like that.
Okay, hello, my name's Maddie. I use she, her pronouns. I would say the least important question is what is the correct interpretation?
Awesome. Sue, if you have one, what would you find to be the least important question about the Bible?
Well, First of all, I'm Susan
Yeah.
Stanier,
Yes,
and I'm she, her,
thank you.
and it was answered by other people.
Oh, okay, okay.
Is it really true?
Is it really true? There you go. Hey, Kenny.
Hey, Kenny, Keehan, people can ask me any questions as well, important or not. And then for the least important question about the Bible, I guess I would say, I had a couple thoughts in my head and I just lost the one I was.
Okay, if it comes back, share it. If not, it's fine.
I guess basically, do you have to know everything about the Bible in order to believe in Christianity?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. That's the least important question to you?
I guess just like, if, in terms of if you followed the scripture of the Bible for your religion, like, have you read every single word in here versus having knowledge of it?
Okay, good. Victoria.
Victoria, she, her. I could go with a few of these, but I'll go with, is it the word of God?
Chantel, she, her. I'm gonna go with a couple people said it, is it true? I think that's very important.
It's so interesting. So I'll just simply share my reason for saying my answer. You know, when I first came into Unitarian Universalism, of course, I grew up Baptist. And so I knew the Bible really well. And I wanted to see how my new faith used the Bible. It reminds me a lot of Maddie, when Maddie first started coming here, right? That, you know, you first came like to a Bible study class. And you know, I want to see what you guys do with the Bible. And at that point, Unitarian Universalism, especially the congregation of which I was a member, had a lot of naysayers, and they weren't really engaging the Bible, you know, directly or seriously, which is probably one of the reasons I do it every year as in my ministry, right? Because I just thought that didn't make any sense to me. And when I asked them why, like, oh, Jesus probably never existed anyway. And my response was, I don't care if Jesus existed, because he's everywhere. Whether he actually breathed and walked the earth. Just look around this country. Jesus is everywhere. This book is everywhere. So that was a really strong response that I had to the very first church member that I ever had. That were my colleagues, you know, as a member. Kenny's got his hand up.
I think the question of what is the correct interpretation, I think you said that. I think that's a good answer, because that's not something we can give a definitive answer on, obviously.
Now, Scott, you have another hand up?
Oh my heavens, it's John Lytle. Introduce yourself, Mr. John, and tell me if you have it in your head at the moment. What do you think might be the least important question about the Bible?
Maybe the one you just answered.
Okay.
And I'll just pile on your answer to say that it's not just a religious question, but so much modern literature makes reference. And so many English words are derived from stories through the Bible, like
And phrases.
what a good Samaritan is.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. I mean, I never forget, I read James Joyce's The Dead, if anybody's ever read that, as an English major, and I read a lot of other literature as an English major.
Did you have the extra hand?
Oh my heavens, I certainly do, John. There you go. Take another one in case someone else comes to. Thank you, John.
Got it.
Oh,
You said introduce myself. John Lytle, if you don't know me.
the treasurer, money bags.
Troublemaker showing up late.
And so I realized I didn't know religious history, even though I knew the Bible. So like James Joyce is really talking about Catholicism and how it operates, you know, in his native Ireland. And like, it just went like right past me. And so that was the reason I ended up studying the classics as a graduate student, because I felt like I read all this modern literature, but I missed everything that came before it. And so I felt like I had this beautiful house built on sticks, and I was afraid it would come crashing down. Anyway, so that's just a brief, you know, biography of my, you know, of student history. And believe it or not, those student loans are finally paid off. Only took until about 2 years ago. But anyway, so we're going to move to. Thank you for all that. Phil had mentioned, and I did share this document, I hope it was readable, because I realized the version of it that I had wasn't so readable, so if it wasn't, let me know and I'll make a new version. The one that I sent you electronically. This is the JEDP source theory. All right, so we're gonna go around and just read this out loud, because I think it's an important day, it's not that long. And so we're gonna start with Maria on page 1. If you just start reading and just go from one paragraph to the next and share it around the table and speak loud enough for the pretty people on the Zoom call here.
Okay. Literary analysis shows that the Pentateuch or Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, was not written by one person. Multiple strands of oral and written tradition were woven together to produce the Torah.
Thank you. The view that is persuasive to most of the critical scholars of the Pentateuch is called the documentary hypothesis, or the Graf-Wellhausen hypothesis, after the names of the 19th century scholars who put it in its classic form.
Who put the theory in its classic form, not the Bible. Going to clarify that. Go ahead, Sue. Read the next paragraph.
It is also called the JEDP.
Yes.
Source history, source theory.
Mhm.
And since that is the most straightforward thing, that is the name we will be using in this class.
Briefly stated, the JEDP source theory states that the Hebrew Bible, Christian Old Testament, was written by a series of authors writing within 4 literary traditions. These traditions are known as JEDP.
J, the Jawist or Jerusalem source uses.
That's
shall I say
Yahweh.
Yahweh?
Yes.
Or- Okay, or spell it out.
And
Yahweh as
it's
opposed to-
Yahweh. I should have let you know that. It's Yahweh. But in other languages, it's spelled with a J. That's why it's confusing in English. But go ahead.
This source's interests indicate the writer most likely lived in the southern kingdom of Judah in the time of the divided kingdom. The J source is responsible for most of Genesis.
David.
The Elohist or Ephraimitic source uses Elohim, God, for the divine name until Exodus 3-6, where Yahweh revealed to Moses and to Israel. This source seems to have lived in the northern kingdom of Israel during the divided kingdom. He wrote Genesis 22, the sacrifice of Isaac, story, and other parts of Genesis, and much of Exodus and Numbers.
John.
J and E were joined fairly early, apparently after the fall of the Northern Kingdom in 722 before Common Era. It is often difficult to separate J and E stories that emerge.
Can you do that, Mary?
No.
Okay, Sue?
B, the Deuteronomist, wrote almost all of Deuteronomy and probably also Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. This source would have lived in the southern kingdom of Judah because the northern kingdom had been overrun and conquered by the Assyrians. Scholars often associate Deuteronomy with the book found by King Josiah in 622 BCE to Kings 22. But they believe that the time frame of the actual writing of the D materials was written as early as Hezekiah's report.
Awesome.
He, the priestly source, provided the first chapter of Genesis, the book of Leviticus, and other sections with genealogical information, the priesthood, and worship. For a time frame for these writings, scholars view P as containing materials written prior to the Babylonian exile and during the exile, as well as having some materials written after the exile. Therefore, this source would have lived in the southern kingdom of Judah in Babylon and in Jerusalem after the Babylonian exile.
All right. So we talked about the priestly sources last week, especially the opening of Genesis, where it had that really tight formula. You know, the first day was this, and God said this, and then it happened, and it was good, and that was the 4th day. The other priestly sources will be any of the begats, any of that, those long genealogical lists. because the priests are really interested in providing proof texts. So you can look and see where these heroes in the literature have their origin. This is just meant to give you an idea of one dominant hypothesis about how the Bible was put together. We talked last week how it is a book of books. And this is just part of that understanding. This is where that understanding comes from. And they get most of this, of course, there's not notes like in margins, hey, I'm one of the e-writers, and I'm writing this in 674 before the, no. It's just an analysis of the style of writing, sometimes of the words and phrases used, the constructions of how they put the language together, all that stuff. And what are they trying to emphasize? One of the things you'll notice in lots of the Bible is there are certain places where they're basically telling you with theology to believe, they're not just telling you the story. In the Christian scriptures, this is most frequently seen in the gospel according to John. If you look at the first three gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, those gospels kind of tell the story in different ways. And especially the Gospel of Mark is basically an action movie. Jesus almost doesn't really talk much about who he is and why he's doing what he's doing. But in John, there's a whole lot of Jesus sitting around saying, oh, I am the way and the truth and the life. A lot of theologizing, because that is the latest of the four Gospels. And the people who are in charge of this new movement, trying to put together this new way of understanding religion, want their readers, well, most of them back then would have been listeners, to understand what is the correct teaching. So they're correcting the teaching within the text. Whereas Mark is a much more exciting read, even though it's considered to be not the prettiest prose of the Greek language of its era. Because Jesus does something, the apostles are like, what happened? I don't know. How'd he do it? Oh, I don't know. Hey, where'd he go? I don't know. And they chase him through the desert to the next miracle, right? But there's not a whole lot of commentary on what's happening in Mark. And so each of the gospels beyond Mark, Matthew has a lot of commentary, which aims us towards trying to understand this new way as a revision of Judaism. So that's why the book of Matthew is so hard on the Jews of the time, because Matthew's a Jew and he's trying to convince other Jews that you should be following Jesus. This is the right form of Judaism. And of course, that gets interpreted in later times by people who want to have an excuse to be anti-Semitic and point to the Bible where it's being that way. But most scholars agree the reason that Matthew is so hard on Jews is because, our fights within our family are often much more fierce than the fights outside of it, right? And so he's trying to say, you guys have it all wrong. This is what you should be doing to worship God. And then Luke is completely different. Luke is more the gospel to the general people beyond those who are already Jewish. And so all these different things are what color the different books of the Bible. Yes, Mary.
Yeah, before my meds kick in. Last week's reading, we didn't finish it. 3 places in Genesis mentioned a pluralistic gods.
Yeah, we talked about in Genesis 1, like 26, yeah.
But there was a third part in 6. Where the gods came down and mated with the female.
That's right.
And
they proved their likeness.
They had, what do you call the giants? The feeling? No.
What was that? No. Nephilim, yeah. Yep.
Okay, and they were heroes. The very next, I think it's 6:4. God can't stand humanity.
So let me talk about that, because we've got a lesson and I want to get us towards the main topic of the course, but you brought up really important things that are also important for us in this lesson here about the construction of the Bible.
Let me finish this.
Oh, I thought you were, I'm sorry.
No. Up until this point, anything that humans have done that were wrong, eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil hadn't been created, paying with murder, it's all been doing curses. God has given them curses. Adam has to toil, Eve pain in childbirth, serpent falling, and Cain being marked and being a nomad. No laws or rules or regulations have been given to anybody about anything. So why does he tell Noah he wants to kill everybody? What crime did they commit? What made them so bad? The only thing I can see is that maybe lust.
So
Sex,
these are-
which makes me think if the Nephilim were created from the gods mating with women, then really man is, if he's lustful, made in the image and likeness of the gods.
Okay, now I see where you're at. Okay. All right, cool. So that's this. So these have all had echoes to other ancient Near Eastern religions. So in Acadia and in Samaria, these tales of the original gods are such that the gods kind of create humanity to do their difficult, dirty work for them. And some of the things they like about humankind that they've created, like they kind of like to go and meddle sexually, and in those cases, those are pantheisms, so they actually have goddesses too. But they also they don't like how much noise we make. They say that we stink, and they eventually kill us all. Very similar to the Noah story. And so a lot of those vestiges in that part of Genesis are believed to have been deliberately crafted by the authors of the ancient texts because they would have known about the religious stories of the peoples around them. So it's a way for them to tell a story that has an echo of, oh yeah, I've heard this story before about the gods and about the creation of humanity, but this is our take on it. So the rest of it, nobody knows, but you pick up a lot of things. And maybe we come back to that, about the notion of lust, but the whole notion of, is there a host of heavenly beings besides Yahweh? And if there is, why does Yahweh have to be so demanding that there's only one God and you shall have no other God before me? Well, if there is only one God, how can I have another God before you? All those are really important questions, right? So, but the main reason that those episodes specifically are in Genesis is because they're in the Enuma Elish, they're in the story of Tiamat and in Gilgamesh. They're all in the story of how humanity was created by gods and then was destroyed by the gods because, they're doing all the dirty work for us, but they're just, get rid of them. They're too smelly and they make noise. And that's true in at least two of those three ancient myths. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. So they're good observations. Thank you for reminding us about those. So look again on this handout. You'll see it'll give you an idea of about the dates. Dates mean more to some people than others. I tend to hold on to dates, so they really mean a lot to me. I can kind of tell you what I was doing if you name a year, maybe even a month. I have a weird brain. But these do help us understand where these different movements come to be within the history of the composition of the Bible. And the last page gives you the style of work from the various different ones, right? And this did not print well, did it? So, oh man, how do people put boxes like that in my documents? I didn't even check that out. All right, I will print this again for you. I have no idea how that happened. All right, I will look at that again, but you got a sense that this is a constructed text. It's a book of books, and each book within the book had many hands in it. That's just the most important thing to remember. Right? It's so unlike, say, Islam, where the notion is that all of the Quran comes from God through one person. This is not how this book is even assumed by the deepest of believers to have been written. So that's one of the differences here. Any questions, observations before I move us to the next thing? All right. So one of the things that helps us understand some of this and has been useful in biblical studies, a lot of the best in biblical studies has come out of the study of ancient languages and literature, where they're able to do a textual analysis of different parts of the Bible. And one of the things that they've discovered, this is Judges 5:1. So you can open your Bible up to Judges 5:1. This is a famous passage known as the Song of Deborah. And the reason the Song of Deborah is an important piece here, this is for Deborah and Barak. Yes, where the former president got his name. And this is after Deborah is a prophetess, and like a lot of the prophets, she's judging Israel, and what happens is they win a great battle. And they bring this song in, but the song doesn't really seem to match the battle. And the only reason I'm pointing it to you is just as like a pointer, because it's kind of longish, but what it has is, I'll just read the first couple of verses of it. Then Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang on that day, saying, when locks are long in Israel, when the people offer themselves willingly, bless the Lord. Hear, O kings, give ear, O princes, to the Lord. I will sing, I will make melody to the Lord, the God of Israel. Lord, when you went from Seir, when you marched from the region of Edom, the earth trembled and the heavens poured. The clouds indeed poured water, the mountains quaked before the Lord, the one of Sinai, before the Lord, the God of Israel. So what the scholars discovered, and it's a pretty convincing argument, is this is almost an exact copy of an ancient Egyptian religious song, translated from Hebrew with the names of the characters. And so again, what this tells us is that the educated religious elite of the time were very aware of the religions around them, and anybody who also was somewhat educated, they also would have encountered the religions around them. One of the things important things to remember about where this land is. So if you look at where Israel is on a larger map, and for those of you who have study Bibles, Israel is at a crossroads. The reason it's always being conquered is because if you're sailing east on the Mediterranean, you're going to land somewhere near there. You got to, if you want to go to Asia, if you're going from Europe to Africa, you have to go through there. And because of this, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, all of the cities of ancient Israel were very cosmopolitan. They had people from all over the world. There were trade routes, and that's why the Romans wanted to control. Why else would the Romans want to control this pesky group of people? Well, because it was an important trade route. And so it's just important to remember that this was a very cosmopolitan place, and they heard about things that are all around the world. That's why when Christianity starts to become popular, they're able to go to all these other places because they have people that have come from those places and have heard about the Jesus movement, and they've taken it back to their home cities, whether it's Philippi or Ephesus or Corinth or any of those places. So this is not, just don't think about this particular setting as like an isolated backwater. It's not. I mean, it's not the most modern city of its time, but there are people from all over the world, in and out of Jerusalem, in and out of Israel, all the time from antiquity. All right. All right. That's why I wanted to share that. So this is how we've discovered this documentary hypothesis, because we see these other things that scholars can say, oh my goodness, it's just like that other thing that we know is older than the Hebrew Bible. And so obviously they know about it. Right. The other thing about literature, for those of you who study literature, there comes genres. People, whether it's a mystery or a romance, readers, or in those days, listeners, they expected a certain genre. They expected their stories to have certain kinds of characters. And they've used that understanding. There's a term called a hagiography. And that comes from the Greek word that also is translated as saint. Hagiography is basically the story of great and powerful people or saintly people. And in a hagiography, your main character better have divine parentage, or else the listener's not going to believe it's actually a story about a great person. Your main character better do miracles, or your listeners are not going to. It's just like if you're trying to sell a romance novel, in a dime store, and you don't have a picture of Fabio or some hunky male model with a six-pack, people aren't going to think it's a romance. It's the same thing. The genre expectation defines what kind of has to be in the story. And so when scholars who were willing to question the orthodoxy read the Bible in the 19th century and began to criticize it from that scholarly lens, they started to read around the miracle stories. They started to read around some of that sort of divine parentage and all that stuff to find what for them what's the real difference here. Because if you compare this with other books, especially the Christian Gospels, if you compare those with other hagiographies written at the exact same time, you can see all the parallels. Like there's Apollo of it's not Balak, but there's a famous hagiography written almost the exact same time as the Book of Matthew. Divine parentage, rises from the dead, heals the sick, all that stuff. Because otherwise your listener would not think it was a powerful, important person to follow and to emulate.
Does that include virgin birth?
Virgin birth, all of it. Yep,
Absolutely.
all of it.
Yeah, the Roman soldiers, their god,
Yeah.
virgin birth, born in a cave.
Exactly. A lot of stories of Jesus come right out of one of the Roman gods. That's right. Mithras, I believe you're right. Yeah. Thank you. All right. So let's go into one of the texts for tonight. Find your way to the Song of Songs, which is just before the book of Isaiah. All right. In some books, it's called the Canticle of Canticles. In some books, it's called the Song of Solomon. It's all the same text. All right. All right. Find your way there. I'm going to read you a little bit about this. And then we're going to read a lot of this out loud, and I want you to tell me what it means. Because I have no idea. All right. And I'm not saying that facetiously. I really don't know. So this comes from John Levinson. This is an old biblical text called the Hebrew Bible. He used to teach at, I believe, at Yale, and it's so old. It's not as old as some, but it has a CD-ROM. Remember when books might? And I still have it. So I guess that makes it a little more worth a little more money on eBay if I were to ever sell it.
It's so
And so
it's so old. It's written in script.
No, but one of these days. So this is what John Holland writes about it. Because of its exceptional character in the biblical corpus, the Song of Songs has always been controversial. Fragments of 3 copies of the work have been found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. There was some dispute among the rabbis as to whether the song should be included in the canon of Scripture. And the great Rabbi Akiba, who died around 135 of the Common Era, is said to have declared that the whole world was not worth the day on which this book was written. For all the scriptures are holy, but the Song of Songs is the holy of holies. And yet another rabbi says anyone who sang the song in a banquet house like a profane song would have no share in the world to come. So all over the place, right? People have been arguing about this stuff for a really long time. And in Christian tradition, the psalm was sort of superseded to suggest to be read as an allegory of the love between Christ and the church. The association of this book with Solomon is due to the fact that he's mentioned several times, and there are references to a king. And these references led editors to ascribe Solomon in the title. But he's never the speaker in any of the passages that mention him. And in some other cases, he's introduced in the context of a comparison, but it doesn't really seem to be addressed necessarily to him either. So it's just, we're supposed to think that it was probably composed somewhere or gathered somewhere around the time that he lived, whatever that means. All right. Who has anything to share in what their study Bible might say about this book before we get started? There's some confusion about gender in chapter 8. We're going to read a lot of this tonight. So I kind of wanted to get us here so we can read as much of this as possible because it's a rather confusing text. It's evocative and it really opens the door to some of the Christian mystics who speak about their love of God, often in very embodied and sensual ways. And it also is something that helps. We see it also in some of the writings of some of the Muslim mystics like Rumi and Hafiz, who talk about their love of God in a very direct way, an embodied way. So before we start just reading this out loud, does anyone have anything they want to lift up about this or any questions they have about it or anything they want to make sure that we look at closely in this text? Yes.
I was laughing when I saw that you had assigned this because it was assigned in my undergraduate biblical studies that I over 40 years ago. And I remembered that the professor, Dr. Patrick Quinn, I don't even remember anything else, much else about anything in college, but I remember him being so excited about this because it was so titillating. And that he was just head over heels about, and he said, he drew our attention because I wrote on this my study Bible.
Oh my goodness! See, look at this.
He drew our attention to chapter 4.
Okay.
And he was like, just look at how like your hair is like a flock of goats streaming down Mount Gilead.
Yes.
Your teeth are like a flock of ewes just shorn, which have come up fresh from the dipping. He was like, this is so, if you were at that place at that time, this would have been like just as so erotic. Like this is, like how like both not only is it so physical, but it's also something everybody would know what you look like when they come up from the dipping. Like it was just so. It was like he was so excited about like this is clearly in here as as like maybe it doesn't belong here because it's just way too titillating for the rest of the. So
it's surprising to me that it actually made it into the Christian canon. I understand how it stays in the Hebrew canon. But you should know that the Hebrew canon is sort of solidified in about the 3rd century before the Common Era. It's called in a book called the Septuagint, which is done in Greek because Greek is the language of the Middle East at that time. The Greeks controlled Israel before the Romans did, and the Septuagint simply means 70 because they rounded it off to 70 books. There are some Hebrew Bible apocrypha too, but which are written later or discovered later. But the basic canon gets set, and they just because they have a tradition of argument and dialogue, and the rabbis sort of exist to sort of have these arguments. They never saw any reason to not include it, and so yeah. So
I have a question.
Yes, Lauren and then Mary. Yes.
Can you define apocrypha?
Yes, apocrypha is a book that is sometimes considered, it could be authoritative and spiritual, but not everybody agrees. but sometimes they will include it with the Bible that's printed, and that's true of most study Bibles. So the Apocrypha is something that's not considered canonical or officially necessarily part of the canon or the official approved Bible, but it's at least of historical and scholarly interest.
Thank you.
Yes.
In two spots, they mention whether it's a dream or not, it's irrelevant. The watchman. This, she passes the watchman looking for her lover, 2 times, and second time, they abuse her, they beat her up. Who are these watchmen and?
Oh, no, let's read through, let's see if we can figure it out. Maybe the ring can figure it out. Yeah, I've always been confused about that too. I'm gonna begin this, but I'm not gonna read it all. All right, because that's not fair to you or me. All right, Song of Songs, which is Solomon's, it says, colloquy of bride and friends. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. For your love is better than wine, your anointing oils are fragrant, your name is perfume poured out, therefore the maidens love you. Draw me after you, let us make haste. The king has brought me into his chambers, we will exalt and rejoice in you, we will extol your love more than wine, rightly do they love you. I am black and beautiful, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not gaze at me because I am dark, because the sun has gazed on me. My mother's sons were angry with me, but they made me keeper of the vineyard, but my own vineyard I have not yet. Tell me, you whom my soul loves, where you pasture your flock, where you make it lie down at noon. For why should I be like one who is veiled beside the flocks of your companions? If you do not know, O fairest among women, follow the tracks of the flocks and pasture your kids beside the shepherd's tents. I compare you, my love, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots. Your cheeks are comely with ornaments, your neck with strings of jewels. We will make you ornaments of gold studded with silver. While the king was on his couch, my nard gave forth its fragrance. My beloved is to me a bag of myrrh that lies between my breasts. My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyards of Engedi. Ah, you are beautiful, my love. You are beautiful. Your eyes are doves. Oh, you are beautiful, my beloved. Truly lovely. Our couch is green. The beams of our house are cedar. The rafters are pine. There we go.
Well, that's just luscious.
There you go. All right, who wants to take the next one? And then we'll stop after 2, then everything's fine. We could stop after every line. Lauren, this is meant to be a broad exposure, not a deep dive into too much detail, just because I want to have this.
Am I reading all two?
I want you to read all.
I am a rose of Sharon, a lily of the valleys. As a lily among brambles, so is my love among maidens. As an apple tree among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among young men. With great delight I sat in his shadow, and his fruit was sweet to my taste.
Oh boy.
He brought me to the banqueting house, and his intention toward me was love. Sustain me with raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am faint with love. Oh, that his left hand were under my head, and that his right hand embraced me. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the wild does, do not stir up or awaken love until it is ready. Springtime Rhapsody. The voice of my beloved, look, he comes, leaping upon the mountains, bounding over the hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Look, there he stands behind our wall, gazing in at the windows, looking through the lattice. My beloved speaks and says to me, arise, my love, my fair one, and come away, for now the winter is past, the rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth, the time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree puts forth its figs, and the vines are in blossom. They give forth fragrance. Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. O my dove, in the clefts of the rock, in the covert of the cliff, let me see your face. Let me hear your voice. For your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. Catch us the foxes, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, for our vineyard are in blossom. My beloved is mine, and I am his. He pastures his flock among the lilies, until the day breathes and the shadows flee. Turn, my beloved, be like a gazelle or a young stag on the cleft mountains.
Right. So is this the kind of Bible reading you're used to?
No.
Not at all.
Any teenage preachers on the corner of my hometown, and there were some of them, shouting these verses. They were usually shouting the damnation verses at the end of Matthew and others. But it would have been much nicer.
Attracted more people.
I know, that's what I'm saying. I know. Yeah, fascinating. This is one of the things that's always important to remember about ancient Israelite society. It's very earthy, it's very fleshy, like even the language, the word ruach, I shared this last week. The word ruach means spirit, it also means breath, and it also means the throat. So the notion of the division between spirit and body, is really a Greek thing that comes later than the original Hebrew spiritual understanding. And we still have it with us.
I found some of them very funny.
You're like, what?
It reminds me of Seven Woods of Leaping, the guy coming leaping like a gazelle, I mean, bounding, it's like.
But she's very clear what she likes in a man.
It's not that.
Yeah, David.
One thing. These passages are written alternately by man and by woman, but mostly, overwhelmingly, by a woman. Was this written by a woman?
Who knows? I mean, it's attributed to Solomon. So, I'm sure there's lots of essays about this that people got grad degrees for. Yeah, maybe he was writing about this, that this was the way he wished the woman spoke to him. Who knows? We don't know. We don't know these things. To me, that's part of the beauty of Bible study is we really don't know. Right?
Something that is more likely to have been written by a woman.
It could be a man who is like, yeah, this is a woman.
That's right.
I'm not fantasizing about it.
My guess is that given the nature of the times, a man would not have written like this.
It's hard to say that because men are the only educated in this society and the only scribes of the religion.
Well, I was reading something about Arab in India where there were men writing about men, but framing it as if they're women, or like certain situations like that happen.
Well, there's a lot of thought about, Shams, the lover in Rumi's poetry. Is that just a metaphor for God, or did he have a man in mind that was, at least in his mind, the lover? Right. All these things are part of what is exciting.
Is there a reason why so many of the passages relate to animals?
Sure, because of the society they're in. Most of the people this would have been written for are not city folks, so that they would have been farmers and they would have known nature. So there's nature imagery throughout all the Bible, and in this particularly. And my guess is because it continues to be adored. This is read during one of the major Jewish holidays still in its entirety. That it still, has resonance in that theology because of the nature imagery.
Could also been written by somebody who was trans.
Say more about that, Fox.
Well, we know that form of genetics has existed as almost as long as mankind. So if you had someone who was in a male body and was raised as a male, but was internally female, whether they dressed that way or not, then you would have somebody who was skilled in being able to write this and have the vocabulary to do it from a woman's perspective.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Sure, I think there's some validity of that. Let's read chapter 4. Let's move to 4. And you want to read it, since you have all the Cliff notes, and you know the translation. I don't know which one yours is.
Yeah, it's the Oxford.
It's Oxford. What's the
Oxford, New England.
is it NRSV or is it RSV or is it King Jimmy? What is it, or Revised Standard?
I don't know, Oxford Study Edition, New English Bible.
Okay, I think it's New English. I think that's the translation. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And that Bible's 40 years old.
Yeah. See, you sounds pretty beat up. So this is 4. How beautiful you are, my dearest, how beautiful. Your eyes behind your veil are like doves. Your hair like a flock of goats streaming down Mount Gilead. Your teeth are like flock of ewes with just shorn, which have come up fresh from the dipping. Each ewe has twins and none has cast a lamb. Your lips are like the scarlet thread and your words are delightful. Your parted lips behind your veil are like a pomegranate cut open. Your neck is like David's tower, which is built with winding courses. 1,000 bucklers hang upon it, and all are warriors' shields. Your 2 breasts are like 2 fawns, twin fawns of a gazelle. While the day is cool and the shadows are dispersing, I will go to the mountains of myrrh and to the hills of frankincense. You are beautiful, my dearest, beautiful without a flaw. Come from Lebanon, my bride, come with me from Lebanon. Hurry down from the top of Amana, from Sinir's top and Hermon's, far from the lion's lairs and the hills, the leopard's haunt. You have stolen my heart, my sister, you have stolen it, my bride. With one of your eyes, with one jewel of your necklace. How beautiful are your breasts, my sister, my bride. Your love is more fragrant than wine, and your perfume sweeter than any spices. Your lips drop sweetness like the honeycomb, my bride. Syrup and milk are under your tongue, and your dress has the scent of Lebanon. Your cheeks are an orchid or an orchard of pomegranates, an orchard full of rare fruits, spikenard and saffron, sweet cane and cinnamon, and every incense-bearing tree and myrrh and aloes, with all the choicest spices. My sister, my bride, is a garden close locked, a fountain sealed. Bride, the fountain is my garden. The fountain in my garden is a spring of running water pouring down from Lebanon. Awake, north wind, and come, south wind, blow upon my garden, that its perfumes may pour forth, that my beloved may come to his garden and enjoy its rare fruits.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, you know, so yeah, I mean, and that version is a lot different than the NRSV, you know, like at the end, like at 14 and a half, like myrrh and aloes with all chief spices, a garden fountain, a well of living water and flowing streams from Lebanon. And here's this person this happens a lot in Jewish love literature, Judaic love literature, I guess I should say. A lot of times the beloved is not from this town, they're from somewhere else, you know. Abraham has to go to Laban, you know, to get his bride, and so does and Rachel and Leah, you know, also have to and they come from somewhere else, and so it's interesting, this notion of being from elsewhere. I hadn't noticed that she was not from their land. Before you read that.
Exogame's a norm.
Well, that is,
Yeah.
he keeps using the word sister. In other Bible study classes I've had with you, there's a lot of incest. Now you're saying that they're saying sister as Miss.
I don't know if there's any reason to think it is biological sister. You know, that, let me see if I've got a note on that, but I don't. My preparation for this, I didn't account anything that was suggesting
I
that.
This
I
says it's a
suspect
Term of endearment. Yeah, yes, Foxy.
I suspect that the sister because they're both Jewish, as opposed. I mean,
Mhm.
exogamy is the norm. Either the male or the female is bound to move, so that your community does not end up with too much genetic material that's the same, and the problems that come from that. But they're sisters in religion. She's a sister in religion. She's another Jew. She's a Jewish woman. It's a woman he can marry, and he's trying to get her to come where he is. You know, this is a
Yep.
very fancy proposal, and this is yours is a very remarkable translation because the only difference I saw between your Bible and a Jewish Bible is the list of herbs. They're in slightly different order and a couple of substitutions.
Awesome.
Also, older
Yeah.
black people use brother and sister.
Yep, yep, that's true, yeah. Older black folks use brother and sister all the time. Yeah, that's not uncommon in, yeah. Yeah.
It was very it was very prevalent last night.
Yeah.
Brother so and
That's right,
sister so.
I did a. That's right, I did a interfaith presentation for Union Baptist, which is a African American Baptist church just on the other side of Brookfield Avenue. And they all refer to one another as brother and sister. And you know, Jesus really talks about that in ways, you know, who's Jewish, Jesus is a Jew. You know, he talks about that, about being brothers and sisters in the faith. He gives in many ways, he reminds folks that if you really do follow my teachings, you may have to say goodbye to your family. And your new family will be be a group of believers that you're with. So that's a whole other class, so I don't want to go down that road. Let's just read 7, and then because I want to get us to David and Jonathan, because that sets us up for next week. If that's okay, but if folks want to dig deeper into this, that's cool, but I kind of just go with me and we can always come back to something because I don't know exactly what we're doing the last class anyway. Anything you want to come back to, maybe save it for the last class. But if there's something tonight, obviously, please raise your hand, stop us and let us engage it now. You can always tell me if I'm going too fast. Who wants to read 7?
I'll read it.
All right, thanks, Alan.
Expressions of praise. How graceful are your feet in sandals, O queenly maiden. Your rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of a master hand. Your navel is a rounded bowl that never lacks mixed wine. Your belly is a heap of wheat encircled with lilies. Your 2 breasts are like 2 fawns, twins of a gazelle. Your neck is like an ivory tower. Your eyes are pools in Heshbon by the gate of Bath Rabbin. Your nose is like a tower of Lebanon overlooking Damascus. Your head crowns you like Carmel, and your flowing locks are like purple. A king is held captive in his tresses. How fair and pleasant you are, O loved ones, delectable maiden. You are stately as a palm tree, and your breasts are like its clusters. I say I will climb the palm tree and lay. I say I will climb the palm tree and lay hold of.
Raise your hand.
Oh, may your breasts be like clusters of the vine, and the scent of your breath like apples, and your kisses like the best wine that goes down smoothly, gliding over lips and teeth. I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. Come, my beloved, let us go forth into the fields and lodge in the villages. Let us go out early to the vineyards and see whether the vines have budded, whether the grape blossoms have opened and the pomegranates are in bloom. There I will give you my love. The mandrakes give forth fragrance, and over our doors are all choice fruits. New new as well as old, which I have laid upon for you, O my beloved.
Okay,
Oof.
who would, there's quite a lot there. I'm just wondering who would, yeah, I mean, so what are the ones that strike you the most?
I would love to see an artist's interpretation of this.
I'm sure they're out there. We should look for them for next week. Yeah. And the interesting thing about this is right smack almost in the middle of the Hebrew Bible, if you look at its location, right? And so it's part of the wisdom stories, they believe. It's right next to the Psalms and just before the prophets began. So, you know, they definitely thought this was a major thing to include. And does this really sound like someone's love song to their church?
No.
It doesn't sound like a love song. It sounds like an insult. I mean, read what it said about her nose. I mean, this.
Maybe they found that flattering, like a tower over Lebanon.
Also, they have different beauty standards.
Yeah.
Uh,
I can't imagine they would have included that if that was an insult. I don't think I would.
It's like a belly was a heap of weeds.
Exactly.
But back then,
Whoa.
women were experienced as more of birth and was more beautiful.
I mean, you have Greek sculptures of women being
they have a
more
fuller-
voluptuous.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's fuller
I
in the
mean,
middle.
Awkward.
Awkward.
It just, like I said, I'd like to see a literal. Well,
Well, I mean, they're using that.
Maybe because they're just.
I understand that.
cute.
I guess so.
I'm trying to be, they're infatuated.
Sure,
I'll be right back. I'm about to lose my power that charge for a reference.
Hello?
I'm wondering if anybody knows why the reference to the dipping, because there's a good reason for it.
The dipping.
The reference of dipping in the beginning.
Did you say that part? Can you read that part again, Alex?
Okay, every spring before the animals went out to the fields, they were dipped the same way we still do to prevent them from carrying parasites. By the same token, part of preparations for certain rituals in the Jewish wheel of the year requires ritual bathing.
Yeah.
Men and women were not necessarily separated. So some of those references to dipping have to do with, oh, I've seen you at the sacred pool. Which also explains why they were able to talk about their hair, because this is a head to toe wash.
So there you go. So this is a window into another culture's ideas of beauty and in their willingness to express it rather explicitly in ways we may not always understand or as beauty. But obviously this meant a lot to the people who wrote it and heard it, and the people for whom it was written. Yeah.
You know, this just seems like the ideal metaphor stories of the Romance period, the initial attraction between men and women.
Oh, so
I think it's really
like a
well.
falling in love moment.
Yeah.
You know, no matter what their genders are. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Well, it seems like infatuation, it's about infatuation, that's when you recognize your infatuation for someone, it's like obsession, but like smaller degree of it, but it's like you just, everything about them is so perfect. You just have to constantly compliment them, and it's like a disbelief that they're so amazing. That's how it comes across, I guess.
This is Sil. I've got something. I can't
Thanks.
find it in Study Bible. I've got the New Interpreter Study Bible, but
Yes.
there was one source I read that was quite different from all of this, which is that what he's describing is the land of Israel or the land of Canaan or wherever it is. And that instead of it being a woman's body, it's really the country, the land.
I mean, that is something that people have tried to make sense of over time. Mhm. And they're using one thing that they're assuming that the reader knows, the human body, to talk about something else, but it still doesn't mean it's not erotic literature that's trying to get you to have that feeling, even if it's meant to have that feeling.
Oh,
Using,
it's
yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
It's almost like either having carnal knowledge of the land or carnal knowledge of another person. Or both.
And I think the intensity, like in verse 12, let us rise early and go to the vineyards. I mean, they want to be together all
The time. That's right. We know people who are like this in love. Sometimes they're younger, sometimes they're not. I never forget my sister. She had this boyfriend in high school, and they would call each other up, and this is before cell phones. And they would just leave the phone off the hook while they were sleeping, in case one of them woke up and wanted to like say something sweet to each other. She drive my dad crazy. That's good. It wasn't. I said, Dad, at least it's not long distance. He used to drive my dad nuts. I'm like, yeah. Oh, but so yeah, I mean, we see this. This is the way people act when they have this feeling. So obviously these feelings, and to have a love of the human body of your beloved, is not seen as something that's unclean or wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what do we make of all that, with all of the moralizing of other supposed righteous folks who want us to hate our bodies? I mean, we get that in part from the Pauline tradition in the Christian scriptures. He seems to be someone who really hates his own body and does not seem to recognize, the importance of sexuality as a key component of human experience. So much so that when he's asked, should we marry, he tells people not to marry, which in that culture means, means you're not having sex either. And because Jesus is coming back any day, that's why he tells people not to marry. Because, we're all going to be separated and go, in heaven, so you need to keep because he really bought into the notion as the body as necessarily unclean. And that actually isn't. There are some parts of the body functions that are declared unclean in Hebrew scriptures, of course, and certain things you're not supposed to do. But the body overall is not seen as something negative. Sex is not seen as something negative.
What do you think?
And it wasn't proscribed for an unmarried woman either.
That's right. That's right.
What do you think? Because I believe it's written 3 times.
Yes.
I entreat you, daughters of Jerusalem, or something like that. Do not stir up or awaken love until it is ready. I mean, what do you make of that?
Yeah, give me the one of the
2-7,
2-7.
5.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
8-4.
8-4 is the one I just read.
Do not stir up or awaken love until it's ready. I don't know. Yeah.
Could that mean the girl's too young and she has to reach puberty first?
I don't know.
No,
Well, from a male perspective, so I think it's talking, I mean.
No, this one's from the female. Oh, that his left hand were under
Here it
my
says
head.
bridegroom,
Mhm.
do not rouse or waken love until it's ready here. That's already.
Oh, okay.
So.
So you're on 2-7? Oh, no, I'll go to 2-7. It's in more than one place. Yes, so they both are saying it.
Okay, right, they did.
They're both saying it. Yeah. And so 2-7, wherever it is,
Yeah, it's the same, basically the same thing.
Oh.
Again, from the bridegroom, it says.
well, a lot of times things were repeated, right?
That's the male.
So they just changed some of the text, but it's the same kind of story in the same text in some of the.
Yes.
So I mean, if you look at it from a very basic standpoint, from the male perspective, I think it's saying like, wait until I'm ready. Like,
Yes.
Well, I
Well,
have,
Yeah, we have time to make this happen.
Yeah.
Slow down a little. Yeah.
mine is, sorry, but mine is an ancient King James version of the Bible.
Good. Let us know what it
And
says.
says, I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, that ye stir not up nor awake my love until he please.
Oh,
Wow.
that's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
different.
It's a very, the King James has been considered less reliable and it's from a scholarly sense, even though some of its poetry is much nicer and prettier. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to make of that.
Is it
Yeah.
capital H?
Yeah.
Mine says, do not rouse her, do not disturb my love until she is ready.
Oh.
That's why I was thinking of the menses. Because even in tribes today.
Yep.
Young girls are married off at 9, but they're not supposed to be touched until they get the menses.
Oh my God. Wow. Really amazing. Well, these are all stuff, topics for you to take to your grad school when you're doing your biblical. I'd like to move us along even after Sarah's comment.
Did anyone read anything about Jesus? Like this sexy about Jesus?
Yes, but not in the Christian scripture.
So when was?
Julian of
when were the
Norwich.
prophets rendered sexless, I guess is my question.
When we're what?
The prophets, like Jesus.
Yeah.
I saw the Da Vinci Code, like
That's right.
when did we get from this to sexless?
When men.
Paul taught.
What's that?
When Paul taught.
Well, when Paul taught, number one, number two, when men control the theology. You gotta remember, the Roman Empire was one of the most misogynistic empires in the history of humankind. And so it was just assumed that it was only going to be men who got educated and men who led. So a couple of 100 years after the Gospels are written, when the church fathers decide what the theology is, they've already had a habit of having all male priests. Even though there are female seers, even in the Christian scriptures, you know, there's Dorcas and others who are leaders of Christian communities in the Christian scriptures. That's not really allowed by the 2nd century. And then we have also the notion, they pick up on other notions in part of some of the Gnostics around them, that you're going to be more pure if you're celibate. So then celibacy becomes necessary for the top echelon of bishops. Not all the priests don't have to be celibate until like the 11th century. Yeah, so all of these things, it just abscesses over time. And they double down and there's no one to question them or to change it. And because the temple and the palace are controlled with similar ideas and often by the same people, there was nothing to change it. All right.
In the Gospel of Thomas, Christ is kissing Mary. And that was not included in the canonical.
Yep.
But she was sort of the second in command.
She has knowledge, according to some sources, that the others don't have. Right. Let's go to 1 Samuel 18 first. As we continue this whirlwind survey of many different parts of the Bible. I realize this goes fast, but that's as much as my choice to give you a more broad exposure and to share this. So 1 Samuel 18 describes Jonathan's covenant with David. All right, 1 Samuel, and you'll find Samuel after Judges, before Kings, if you're trying to find it in the Bible. Who wants to tell me what happens just before 1 Samuel 18?
What chapter?
1 Samuel 18.
18.
So 1 Samuel 17 is David and Goliath. So this is a very popular part of the Bible. Right? This is the one that is always told to kids, you know, David and Goliath. You know, and all this part of Samuel is trying. But one of the things that's important about Samuel. Samuel is that part of the Bible. It begins with a woman named Hannah dropping a baby off with Samuel. Samuel is a judge of Israel. And this is before Israel has a monarchy, a kingdom. And the claim in this text is that it's ruled by trustworthy, wise judges. When you have a problem, you go see the judge. And this works when you have a good person who's the judge. And as you learn in this book, Samuel's sons are nowhere near as wise or as free of corruption as he was. And then, because this is ancient Israel and they're being run over by this group and that group, the people of Israel, of ancient Israel, come to Samuel and say, appoint a king over us, because we need someone to protect us. So this is before there is a monarchy. And of course, Saul becomes the first king. And apparently God tells Samuel that Saul should be the king. Saul appoints him as king, and Saul is like typically kingly. He stands head and shoulders above the rest. You know, he's proven himself in these sort of contests, but he's not a very good king. And interestingly, Samuel tries to warn the people of Israel. And this is a great, I've actually used this in worship, and I probably need to do it again, considering we may have a ruler right now who thinks he's a king. 1 Samuel 8, Samuel goes to great lengths to tell them why the last thing you want is a king. Because he's going to take your sons and make them join your army. He's going to take his daughters and make them part of your harem. He's going to tax you. He's going to take your land when he wants. And they're like, no, give us a king. He gives them all these reasons why you should never want a king. And they're like, no, give us a king. And so Samuel has a vision. He appoints a king, and the king isn't so good. It's Saul. And then David starts to prove himself. And David is not the typical, you know, head and shoulders above the rest warrior as far as looking like it out of central casting. But he proves himself to be an amazing warrior. And apparently, according to the text, he's gorgeous. The way they describe him, like he has these eyes and he has this hair, and all the ladies just fall down. And it's not just the ladies. So after David and Goliath, which everyone has witnessed, we have this passage in 1 Samuel 18. Okay. I'm going to read some of this. When David had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved David as his own soul. Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Meaning, he took David. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. It says this over and over. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that he was wearing and gave it to David, and his armor, and his sword, and his bow, and his belt. David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him. And as a result, Saul set him over the army, and all the people, even the servants of Saul, approved. And as they were coming home, when David returned from the killing the Philistine, the women came out of all the towns of Israel, singing and dancing, to meet King Saul with tambourines, with songs of joy, and with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another as they made merry. Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000. Saul was very angry. For this saying displeased him. So Saul eyed David from that day on. So, here Saul the king wants to get rid of David, because kings don't like when other people get the attention. Boy, is this sounding familiar.
Yeah.
So what do you want to make? Who wants to tell me what all this means about Jonathan giving all of this to David? Who wants to tell me what all this means? Because I don't know. Yeah.
Sounded to me like a very strong homosexual relationship with a deep love.
Right.
And I found more sexuality just in those few lines than I did in all of Song of Songs. And more affection and love.
Mm-hmm. Who can tell me who else in ancient history has a really tight bond like this from one of the great Greek epics? You may not know this off the top of your head. Achilles and Patroclus. They are so, they literally sleep together in the same place. during the siege on Troy. And Patroclus, when Patroclus gets killed, Achilles just, he mourns for like a month. He stops fighting. And finally they have to appeal to him. And when they appeal to him, he comes and really wreaks havoc, on the Trojans. But this is not uncommon among warrior literature, expressing this kind of bond that seems to be more than what we might understand as just traditional honor or affection. I think it might be difficult to say with certainty that it necessarily, implies a physical relationship, but there certainly is an attraction that they are willing to talk about and to act upon, no matter what actually happens between their bodies, right? But that's not really the important thing anyway. We're trying to talk about what is the actual sense of love that's possible here. Yes.
In the commentary.
Oh, please.
I'm sorry.
No, yeah, go ahead.
In the commentary in the Bible that I've been reading, the commentary, the note on these verses says, among other things, these verses do not necessarily express a homoerotic relationship.
But they do not necessarily.
Yeah, I agree.
Didn't say for sure, but
I agree with that. I don't
We-
think necessarily.
I think you might be right.
Yeah.
I think that's
We
definitely
we have to remember too that in that time and within the Jewish culture, so long as you carried on the bloodline, you were free to do what you wanted.
Yeah.
Homosexuality was not a problem.
Thanks, Foxy.
And I think that extended beyond the Jewish culture, certainly.
Yeah,
That
but
was,
I can speak for that. I can't speak for anything else. Well,
Let David continue. Thanks.
As an example, it doesn't necessarily suggest a homoerotic relationship. I have a lifelong best friend since the last week of June 1959, whom I love. And I tell him that. And he tells me he loves me, but it's not an erotic relationship. But it's one of the problems with the English language is it only has one word that is supposed to cover so many.
Oh my, were you paying attention on Sunday?
No, I wasn't.
You're not talking about the 4 Greek words for love.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, right.
Different types of love.
Yeah, thank you for that.
It's more than 4.
Yeah, and so of course, Jonathan is Saul's son, and Saul, the king, wants David dead. So this is very intertwined. It's not just, affection or love or whatever it is. It's also politics. And so Jonathan's in this place where he admires or loves. He says he loves him like his own soul. So I'm just going to take what the text says. And yet, if he helps David, he's committing treason against his own father. So Jonathan is in a really hard place here.
I miss that he was the son of
He's
Saul.
Saul.
But it's clear he gives David his full support. By
Thanks.
giving him his clothing and his sword. And
Exactly. Yes, you can.
He's giving him everything.
Exactly. Because it's the son of the king who's supposed to be the next king. But he's giving David the garments, the raiment of royalty. And of course, we'll learn that David will become the next king. And then in 1 Samuel 19, Jonathan intercedes for David. Saul spoke with his son Jonathan and with all his servants about killing David. But Saul's son Jonathan took great delight in David. Jonathan told David, "My father was trying to kill you. Therefore, be on guard. You stay in a secret place and hide yourself." So Jonathan tries to speak well of David to his father. The king should not sin against his servant David, etc. So we see this like as an intercession. And then if you go, let's go ahead to 1 Samuel 20. 1 Samuel 20. And this is let's see. I'll just read this, and this will kind of close us out. We're almost there. David fled from Naioth and Ramah. He came before Jonathan and said, "What have I done? What is my guilt and what is my sin against your father?" He said to him, Far from it, you shall not die. My father does nothing either great or small without disclosing it to me. And why should my father hide this from me? But David also swore, your father knows well that you like me, and he thinks, do not let Jonathan know this, that he will be grieved. And so again, he's trying to comfort him that he's going to be okay, but, we need to, you don't get this, Jonathan. You're part of the plan to snag me because your father wouldn't dare tell you that he's going to kill me. And so Jonathan says to David, he's 12, by the Lord, the God of Israel, when I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow, if he is well disposed toward David, shall I not then send and dispose it to you? But if my father intends to do you harm, the Lord do so to Jonathan. So in other words, hurt me, Lord, instead of David, and more also if I do not disclose it to you. So we see that this connection keeps going deeper and deeper. And it's just important to notice that our culture doesn't seem to have, until recently, an approval for the kind of, deep affection that people of same gender can show towards one another. And in many places in this country, you're still in danger if you express that. And if you're probably more in danger today than you might have been just 10 years ago, right? What's going on?
6 months ago.
Or 6 months, yeah. And it's interesting, because we have perceptions of other cultures, particularly of Islam, as being particularly intolerant. But if you go to some Islamic countries, men go to movies together holding hands. So I just think sometimes I think sometimes in the US, in the West in general, we think we know a lot more than we do. And we make a lot of assumptions. I certainly saw that when I was in Vietnam learning about their history and how little we knew when we went there. Seemed to be unwilling to learn or know. And so I don't know what all this means, but I do know that it's been great to have this time with you, now that it's 8:33. And next week, you're going to go specifically if there's passages in the Bible that some people claim show that homosexuality is forbidden by the Bible. And I hope to be able to show you that those are not. Without further ado, we are done class. I will send out the passages for you to read and this recording as soon as I have this recording uploaded to the place on our YouTube page. Thank you, and God save everyone home. Even if you're at home on your screens.
Thank you.
Bye, Foxy and Sil. I'm signing off.
Bye, guys. Bye,
Bye-bye.
thanks.